Hey everybody, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 9th of September, 2022, and on today's show we are previewing the weekend of Big 12 football. A look at every single game happening for teams currently in the Big 12 and also those teams that are joining the Big 12. Previews, whole lot of discussion, talk of Texas, Alabama. Does Texas have a chance? Can Baylor get that big road win to kind of catapult their season? Can KU contend on the road? A whole lot of great games this week to talk about. That's coming up next on the show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. So a couple things before we get going. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We are less than 50 away from 2,000. We're making that subscriber push here till the end of October. I don't care, or end of September, excuse me. I don't care where the number ends up. We're going to get over 2,000 here pretty soon. Let's just push this thing as far as we can and get the subscriptions up. You guys have been fantastic. Love the feedback. Love the comments, everything. I always love engaging with you all. I actually like to mention a lot of the comments, and I will today in today's show. So, send your hate, your constructive criticism, your likes, your dislike, your thoughts about conference expansion, about certain games, about how much I talk about your teams, all that stuff you guys can send, and I love talking about it. Also, make sure you guys find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to get in still on our CBS Sports Pick'em, there's still time to do it. You guys can join whenever. The group is called Locked On Big 12 on CBS Sports. Just use the password Big 12, BIG12, no space, no caps, and you guys can get in on the action. If you finish top 3 by the end of the season, you guys will get a prize pack free. It's free to play from the folks here at Locked On. So go head-to-head with us, picking games against the spread. All right, so in week 2 is notoriously a really weak week, W-E-A-K, W-E-E-K, week. So it's interesting because the week 1 for us was really bad, right? For us in the Big 12, we did not have very many good games. The Backyard Brawl was good. And then the second best game we were looking at for the back after that was, the TCU Colorado game was kind of the best head-to-head game. I mean, I think in terms of watchability, watching Spencer Sanders do what he did was probably the second most watchable thing that happened behind the Backyard Brawl. But this week, you're just absolutely loaded with games in every single time slot. I mean, from noon or from 11 o'clock Central Time, noon Eastern Time, until 4, you have the Missouri-Kansas State game, which is interesting. Obviously, you have Alabama and Texas. So if you're a two-screener like me, those 2 games are the easy picks to go up on the 2 monitors. Then 4 o'clock, FS1, or the 3 Central, we'll keep going Central Time, 3 Central, 4 Eastern. You've got Houston at Texas Tech. And then you've got Iowa State at Iowa. So those 2 games obviously are really important for both those, or all those teams, not both those teams, for all those teams in a variety of ways. And then at 6 o'clock, you might have to throw on a third screen because that's when Kansas plays West Virginia at 5 Central, 6 Eastern Time. 7 o'clock, Kansas State against Oklahoma. Not sure you have to tune into a ton of that game, but obviously we here will be checking out some of it. And then at 6:30, Central Time, 7:30 Eastern, Arizona State at Oklahoma State. Tarleton goes to TCU at 7 Central, and then BYU and Baylor happens at 9:15 Central. So you're really just wall to wall today, and that's kind of expanding on what we've been talking about the Big 12's reach and really, filling all these time zones now, time slots. We did a big discussion yesterday about time zones versus time slots. It's my belief that Brett Yormark talked about a team in the 4th time zone. I know Utah's not there. Arizona is there temporarily because the way they observe daylight savings. I understand that those teams aren't there, but I think more is about filling that 4th TV window, right? You have the early window, you have the middle of the afternoon window, you have the 7 o'clock, prime time-ish window. Then you have the late window. It's 4 time windows, really. We're talking about filling sporting, especially football content. Those are the 4 windows that we're really looking at here with that. All right, so without further ado, let's get on to the action this week. Now, a couple games that kind of will not, a TCU Tarleton. We have a TCU host, Steven Simcox. We're not going to touch a ton on that game. Oklahoma State, Arizona State, not going to do a ton of that. The reason being is that I did a full preview of this game with the folks over at Locked On Sun Devils. So if you want a full preview of what's going to happen between Oklahoma State and Arizona State, 25 minutes, I think I did with the folks over there. So go check that out. Locked On Sun Devils feed will have a full preview of Oklahoma State ASU. All right, let's get after it here. So the first game I want to look at is obviously the big one. It is Texas hosting Alabama, 11 a.m. on Fox tomorrow. Now, this game, I've written kind of everything down here. I've got all my notes down here. So the folks who are like, Josh, why are you looking down? It's because I have my notes right here. Texas is 7-1-1 all time in this series. It's the first time they've played since that 2009 season championship game that happened in 2010. Alabama, it's gone from 19.5 to 20.5. It's awesome to see these two helmets play, right? It's awesome to see these two teams get together on the same field. I will say this, though. This is like just not the time for Texas to be playing Alabama. There are games that are like measuring stick games. And so I would say for Texas, like Baylor's a really good measuring stick game because the way Baylor plays is that they're really tough on both fronts. And where do we want to now, they're not Will Anderson, Dallas Turner tough on every single front. But at the end of the year, when Baylor plays Texas, it works out in the schedule they're going to play at the end of the year. That's really nice that we're going to see that matchup because I think it'll be a good indicator of how far Texas has come, especially on the offensive line. This is just an ill-timed test, I think is kind of what I'm saying here. Quinn Ewers has barely played any football since he was injured part of his junior season. So, he's really been off and on since then. Didn't play at OSU. Has played one game now at Texas. And you're going up against, a generational defensive player in Will Anderson and his partner, Dallas Turner, the other outside linebacker, not to mention they got pretty good interior at the front too. So and also Will Anderson likes to play interior because he's just an animal. And he said, hey, I like go up against guards because they're slower. Cole Kublik told us that the other day, just you're a maniac, Will Anderson. We love you. The key for them is number one, get the ball to Bijan Robinson. He's the one player, he and Xavier Worthy are really the two players that are like the Alabama level talent that's happened on the field, right? When you watch those guys play, you say to yourself, oh, they could be playing on Alabama. That they could be parts of what Alabama is doing. Bijan Robinson, for the first time in a while is not going to be the best player on the field, which is interesting, but he is Texas's best player. And so I've talked about not wanting to ride Bijan Robinson a lot, just, as a precaution, but like, this is the game where you do it. If there was ever a time, if there was ever a place to just cut a guy like that loose, it's right here. Now, the question is, can your line hold up? I'm not sure, but not just hand him the football, get him the football in every single way possible. Get Xavier Worthy the football in every single way possible, and also take care of that football. When Alabama wins turnover margin, they dominate. But here's the problem. It's safe to say that given where each team is, given where the quarterback situation is at Texas and the youth there, given the experience on Alabama's offense, and look, I know Texas defense has some experience, but you would favor the Alabama defense to force more turnovers. And if that's the case, I don't see Texas covering in this game. So, do they have a chance? Like, sure, there's always a chance, just going to be cliche. But if you look at strength against strength, the Alabama defensive line going up against, Kelvin Banks, freshman, and also Cole Hudson on the interior, who is a freshman. I mean, you don't really think about that being a really fair fight. And it could be down the line. When all these guys in the NFL could be down the line, right? But right now it's not. And so that's why you have to give the advantage there. We talk about quarterbacks. Who has the advantage? Well, Bryce Young has the advantage. When you skill position, you might give the advantage to Texas because of Bijan Robinson and because of Xavier Worthy. But you wonder about the ability to get them the football in places where they can make plays. So because of that, I'm going with Alabama minus 20.5. And I think the key, we'll talk about this later on for West Virginia when they play Kansas. The key for Texas when UTSA comes to them next week, I think UTSA comes to them. Do not let Alabama beat you twice, right? Don't take a loss here. It's ugly, and then move on and not do well because, of what happened in this game. So that's the key, I think, in my opinion, because they're going to lose. It's just a matter of don't let them beat you twice. All right, second game here. This is the game that I'm most fired up about here on the weekend. Baylor against BYU. Baylor's just 2-1 in the series all time. They got the win last year, 38-24, in a game that was not as close. That line has fluctuated from 3 to 3.5. Love this game for a variety of reasons. This is the first time that BYU or Baylor has gone to Provo since 1984. So a good look at what's going to become a rivalry game. Maybe rivalry game here in the Big 12 Conference. Obviously, both these teams are coming in to the one team's coming into the Big 12 Conference. It's BYU. I've seen some really clever names for this rivalry. I saw the altercation that somebody sent me, or somebody tagged me in on Twitter. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. But in terms of the game, like, my big question is this. So I've leaned BYU really since I saw this game on the schedule. The one thing I'm worried about is how healthy are Gunnar Romney and Puka Nacua. Those two guys, Gunnar Romney did not play last week, and Puka Nacua left the game last week. It's important that those two guys play because they are both terrific wide receivers. Both wide, and then in Nakua's case, he can also run the football in some situations as well. But those two guys last season combined for over 1,300 yards, nearly 1,400 yards, and 9 touchdowns. They're going to need to be there for Jaron Hall in this game. I think they both play. It's just a matter. It sounds like it's going to be a game time decision, but I think you kind of are careful with those guys last week in the hopes that they play. I'm just wondering how full go are they going to be? And I know that this defense for BYU is very experienced. The one question is, it wasn't an awesome defense last year. It wasn't like it was the worst defense in the world, but it was not a really awesome defense. They were 51st in scoring defense, but 71st against the rush, 72nd against the pass, and 74th total. And so, in places like finishing drives, they were 86th. Allowing explosive plays, they were 80th. And in defensive efficiency, they were 114th. So these numbers tell us that while they have a lot of experience, it's not necessarily the strength of this team. Good for them is they're getting some experience back at the linebacker, especially too. They bring back middle linebacker who went out in third game last year. So BYU is in a spot this week where I think for them on a difficult schedule, it's a game you'd like to see them win because they've got a lot of difficult games. For Baylor, I think as long as you keep this thing close, win or lose, and you can use this as an experience to identify stuff that you can then turn forward. Like, this is the best time that Baylor could be playing this team because they're so good up front on both sides. They just need to learn about the guys who are at the skill positions more. And the fact that they were able to do that in this really tough environment and test Blake Shapen's mettle, this is an awesome test for them. A difficult test, but it's an awesome test. And it's not just about Blake Shapen. It's about those guys, like Monterey Baldwin, we're going to see now coming on for them at wide receiver and at running back. It's a lot of young guys. It's not just about their young quarterback. It's not a Texas situation where the quarterback's new and everybody else, has been around for a long time. You're thinking about a lot of these guys like Tay McWilliams, right? Kind of the new featured back for them. Monterey Baldwin at wide receiver. Hal Presley at wide receiver. Ben Sims is really, the guy you think about who's been around for the longest time in terms of the skill position players that they have. A lot of these guys also are going to have to learn in an environment like this. So I think because of that, I've wavered back and forth in this game, but I'll take BYU -3 because they're at home. But I wouldn't go much above that. And this is a really difficult game to project because of, I think both these teams are really good. I think the advantage of being at home is huge, and I'm not sure about those BYU wide receivers. I do think the offenses will be working at peak efficiency in this game. So I expect them to go over I think it's 54 is like the total right now. I expect them to go over that. I expect a really fun offensive game in this one. All right, the next game we are going to. Texas Tech is hosting number 25 Houston. This line I've seen at 2.5. I've seen it at 3.5. 3.5 from our folks at Bet Online. Of course, there is vacuuming happening in my house while I'm recording. I am expecting Texas Tech to come into this game and really not hold anything back, right? This is not a game 3:00 Central Time on FS1. Don't hold anything back if you are Texas Tech. Like empty the tank right here. Do what you did last week, right? They showed a lot last week. Keep that rolling. I don't think it matters. This is the nice thing about all their quarterback depth. Like, it doesn't really seem to matter who's playing quarterback for them right now. This offense can hum, and a lot of credit is to Zach Kittley for that. For Houston, on their side of things, they just didn't run the football very well last week. And that's where the loss of McCaskill, their awesome running back, is going to affect them. And we talked with Kevin Eschenfelder, the voice of the Houston Cougars, earlier in the offseason. We did our preview, and he said, look, I think they have guys back there that they can use to help out in that category. But for them, to lose that at running back, and they think Tazon Henry will be a really good guy for them there, but he wasn't last week. And so I think more is going to fall on the wide receivers. Keyshawn Carter and Nathaniel Dell is a spectacular player when they go on the road this week. I think the one benefit too is they just played a really difficult road game. And look, they took a lot of crap for the way that they played. The fact that they didn't play very well, but they pulled out a win. I actually thought that showed a lot of character for them. I actually thought it was a positive thing that they were able to go onto the road and win that game, and a game that they were down in. The fact that they were able to come back and win and then hang around in the overtime and get the stops they needed and get the win, you might say it was luck, but they played a really good UTSA program. So I don't think this Houston team is as good as the Cincinnati teams that I've been comparing them to, the Cincinnati team I compared them to. I think their schedule sets up really nicely, but they've gotten 2 stiff tests early on. This is another stiff test they're getting here early on. I expect them to come out and look a bit sharper. This is a game that'll test that front though. Last year for Texas Tech, last year when we watched a team like TCU and Zach Evans, they ran all over Texas Tech, right? Well, is Houston going to try to reestablish the run in this game in a way they couldn't against UTSA? And with that, will they have some success? Can they get some balance on the offense? We've heard a lot of good things about this Texas Tech defense, but how good is it? Really, I think this will be a good test for them. I'm going to take the points. I'm going to take 3. I like the hook. The hook is a really extra nice piece that I like. This game was close last year. Texas Tech had that massive second half comeback. I think Houston this week goes on the road once again and gets themselves another win. I think it's a close game. I think it's a fun game. I think Houston's defense plays better than it did last week. The results might not be as good because you're playing against a really good offense, but I think Texas, for Houston, they know that it's all about getting after the quarterback. Can they get after Donovan Smith? Can they make him uncomfortable? Get out of the pocket. Now it's a guy who can move a little bit, but can they force him to make some mistakes? And let's get some big takeaways and cash those in. And veteran quarterback Clayton Toon's going to have to be on the ball when he's on the road as well. But this game's really interesting. Houston obviously wants to make an impact when it comes to being, the new dog on the block, the new kids on the block in the state of Texas, in the Big 12. It starts with games like last year's game against, Texas Tech where they lost at NRG. It continues with games like this. They want to be a power in Texas. I think they have a chance to be a power in Texas, but they need to win games like this to kind of build themselves up. Dana Holgerson and crew have a big win, 3 Central on FS1. I'm going with the Cougs plus the 3.5. I suspect this one to be really close. That's just my opinion on this one. All right, quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline and BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for all your pro and college football needs. Follow the latest information, developments, game matchups, news, podcasts, and more. BetOnline has more than just pro and college football. They've got F1, they've got NASCAR, they've got soccer, they've got baseball, they've got all these awesome props. Go check out the props they have for every single sport, guys. They've got some really original stuff over there at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Cy-Hawk Trophy, this one, Iowa State at Iowa, 3.5, another 3.5 point spread. It's crazy. The last 3 games that we've looked at, BYU Baylor, Houston, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Iowa, have had spreads that have jumped between 3, 3.5, 4, and like 2.5. So a lot of these contests that we've been discussing here are expected to be very close. This one, we've made fun of Iowa all week because of their offense, right? The one thing that we've kind of failed to mention in this is the Iowa defense looked just as good as ever last week. I mean, they scored twice, right? They scored more than the offense did. And what happened last year when the Cyhawk game occurred? Well, Iowa didn't win that game. Iowa State beat themselves. And the question is, will that happen again? And I think the answer might be yes. The fact that Iowa State has a young quarterback in Hunter Deckers there, got some experienced guys, but they've got, obviously kind of a young offensive group that we're talking about, the new running backs who are coming in. Some of them have played, but never really started, much like Hunter Deckers. Xavier Hutchinson's a veteran to have, so you'll be leaning on him this game, but I'm sure they'll be keying in on him. We saw last week 3 touchdown catches, and we know they wanted to get him involved. So I think this is a battle for field position in this game. I think it's just a back and forth war of attrition in this game. I think Iowa State's defense will have a lot of success. I think Spencer Petras is awful. I don't know why he keeps starting. I hate to slander the kid, but the performances have not been very good. I think Brian Ferentz should know better, and they keep just trotting out the same stuff over and over again. But in a game that Matt Campbell's never won, do I expect him with a newer quarterback? And look, if Hunter Deckers wins this game, my opinion of him is going to change completely, because this is a guy that is an Iowa guy. He grew up rooting for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He grew up being a fan of that team. And what becomes really interesting is that, he goes to Iowa State, and so now he's playing. He'll get on the field in this game on the road in Iowa City for the first time in the Cyhawk game. I mean, that's a really difficult spot for a guy who understands the magnitude of this rivalry, understands the magnitude of this game. It's a difficult step, man. That's a really difficult step for him to come in and automatically have to do something like this. So I think that I'll take Iowa State. Iowa. I'll lay the 3.5. I don't feel good about it, but I just think that Iowa is going to be able to control the pace of this game, and their defense will have some success. And look, it might not take like 3 turnovers. It might just take 1 or 2 to cost you in what could be a really, really close game that's probably going to be decided by net punting yards. Whoever has the advantage in that category might win this. Next game, Missouri and Kansas State. 7.5, 11 o'clock on ESPN2. This is an old school Big 12 game, or at least recent version of the Big 12 game. It's nice to see this one is coming back. I know a lot of stuff has been made this week about the Kansas State band situation, yelling FKU. Look, as a Missouri graduate, I'm not gonna say I'm upset about the FKU stuff. All right, it's not no. I'm kidding. Whatever happens there at that situation. I know it's rustled some feathers over there with the folks at Kansas State. But this game to me is, can Missouri put the same offensive pressure on Kansas State that they put on Louisiana Tech? Probably not, because the defense is better, but can they put enough on to where we're asking Kansas State to score with the Tigers in this game? Because look, whether they're hiding it last week or it just happened, the passing offense did not look prolific enough. It did not look like they could hit big plays. Louisiana Tech hit 1 big play against Mizzou last week. Would Kansas State even be throwing the ball downfield enough to make that happen? We know they have a playmaker in the passing game in Malik Knowles. We know Phillip Brooks is there too, but we know Malik Knowles as a home run hitter who's got that ability in both kind of, the side-to-side running game and also the vertical passing game as well as the special teams. He's got it all. Can they use that explosive playability to get scores? Can Adrian Martinez help them push the ball downfield? The one thing that improved last week that I'm sure Kansas State's going to want to check is that Missouri run defense. It was really bad last season. Missouri's run defense was horrible last year under Steve Wilkes. It's changed. It's gotten a facelift. It looked a lot better in week 1. We'll see if it's any better here in week 2, because Deuce Vaughn will test that. And sometimes your run defense can be better. It just might not matter because of how good Deuce Vaughn is. So I think they're going to push on that early, use Martinez in the run game early, see if Missouri's line moving some, and then we'll see if they try to hit any deep shots. The guy to watch for the Missouri Tigers is number 3, Luther Burden, the number 3 player in all of college football from St. Louis. decides to go to Missouri, scored twice, at least twice last week. That's a guy who's trying to get the football. Kansas State's game plan has to be centered around getting him. We'll see who's got him in the nickel. It actually could be Sean Robinson, who I know has gone from safety and played some nickel for Kansas State. Will he be the guy who's kind of running back and forth, tracking Luther Burden? You're going to need speed. You're going to need speed to track down that guy. I think he's a big player in this game. So Adrian Martinez down the field. And then also, what does Kansas State's defense do to stop number 3? First road start for Brady Cook. So that is an advantage. I think the Missouri Tigers will cover 7.5. I think Kansas State wins the game. You don't think about Kansas State blowing out teams. Think about them kind of winning tighter, closer games. So I'm going to go with the Tigers plus the points. I think Kansas State here gets the win. All right, some more games here. Kansas and West Virginia. I have my Mountaineer shirt on today. Support the folks there. Look, the question I have here for West Virginia, 5 o'clock Central Time game on ESPN Plus, 12.5 point spread in this one. Will West Virginia let Pitt beat them twice? The good news, they've had like 9 days off, right? So I'm sure those guys, what is it? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah, so you've had 8 days off since your loss to West Virginia. You get to go home, a night game at Milan-Pusker Stadium, and you get Kansas coming to town, who I actually think is kind of the right game right now, right? KU looked really good last week. They looked very good last week. But that being said, West Virginia showed the ability to move the football, even though it's kind of, a variety of ways, right? I'm interested to see how the CJ Donaldson run game looks. I had some questions about how sustainable that was going to be. All right. Which is, I think, a totally fair question. So we'll see what that looks like. Can they get Tony Mathis going on the ground? And can they stop the run in this game? That is going to be a huge key for West Virginia. We know that, Devin Neal is the strength of this offense. We know Jalen Daniels is also one of the strengths of this offense. So can you, in the running game, stop those guys? Obviously, Kai Thomas is back there as well, but Pitt did not have much success running the football. They tried, but, you take out Slovis, with the sacks and whatnot. I mean, he lost 20 yards on the ground in this game. They ran for 99 yards on over 30 plus, or 90 some yards basically on 30 plus carries. And they did run for 3 touchdowns. Pitt did, but it wasn't like that. That was the strength of the offense. I mean, they got some big plays in that game, but they were running for three touchdowns. It wasn't like they were hitting a bunch of explosive plays on the ground. West Virginia did a pretty good job, generally speaking, against the run in that game. Can they do the same against KU? I think it'll be a motivated West Virginia group, especially at night. I think Kansas will hang around. I don't think they get the win, though. I don't think they'll get the win. I think West Virginia can extend this thing late. I don't feel good about 12.5. I don't feel good about 12.5, but I'm actually fired up for this game. It's the first conference game of the season, and I think it's a really nice test for Kansas. Kansas played West Virginia close last year. I mean, you look at the Kansas, the last few games they've been playing, man, like Texas, they get the win. They push TCU. They push West Virginia. They get a win against Tennessee Tech by a lot, which they should. And now this game, I like this game for KU just as a good measuring stick, right? A road opportunity. See where you stack up on the road against I think was a decent West Virginia team. West Virginia, though, if they want to go bowling, man, like this is the game you have to win. I just think this line is evidence of the fact that like Kansas is no longer a pushover at all. 12.5 for KU on the road. We've seen much larger spreads of them in conference. So I think that tells you more about Kansas than it does about West Virginia. I don't think we should discredit West Virginia. Kent State versus Oklahoma. Kent State decided to play. They're going to play like the toughest non-conference schedule ever. So God love them. OU 6 o'clock ESPN Plus. Not going to say much here. Sooners should be able to handle the business in this game. Arizona State versus Oklahoma State. Once again, I'm going to cycle you people over to Locked On Sun Devils for that full preview. It was very good. I enjoyed it. But like not going to spend any time on this game because I did 25 minutes on it, and you guys can find that and you guys will enjoy it over at Locked On Sun Devils. Tarleton Tate and TCU. I'm sure Steven Simcox over at Locked On Horned Frogs has this one covered as well. Just a note with this game, TCU sounds like it's going to be Max Duggan at quarterback. Chandler Morris sounds week to week after this week, so that is good news in that situation. But you should handle Tarleton State no matter who is out there. All right, a couple other games from the teams joining the Big 12. Louisville at UCF, 6.5-point spread, 6:30 on ESPN for this one tonight. It's on Friday night. All right. So UCF UCF fans got mad at me last week. Look, fellas, friends, ladies, whoever it is talking to me, y'all played South Carolina State. Like, I'm not going to dial into that game. So updating the folks about what happened. I'm not going to dial into that game. This one is my full attention. Friday night by itself. I'm watching wire to wire UCF tonight, folks. I'm fired up for it. Fired up to see what Gus Malzahn and John Rice Plumlee have cooked up tonight. I will say this. The one thing that I heard this with the Cover 3 podcast is that teams that lose on the road, I think in week 1, they have a road game week 2. They're horrible against the spread. So I'm going with UCF in this game. And finally, excited to get a chance to get my full first look at them. Kennesaw State and Cincinnati, 2 o'clock on ESPN Plus. This one is on Saturday. Cincinnati looking to rebound in this game. Curious if Ben Bryant's really the full long-term option for them. A lot of that stuff came in garbage time. A lot of the points, not garbage time, but a lot of the point stuff. I was happy with the performance last week. I will say that. You just think for them, is there a better option for them at quarterback? And I think that's something that we talked about with Alex Frank. But Evan Prater, the sophomore, has been the guy that looked a little bit more talented at times. I know he got into the game last week. But I'm wondering if they're going to force the issue and maybe go with him some more. I think he'll get the chance to play some in this game. You just hope that it's a decent amount. So, just to get a good look at him, maybe ramp him up in case there is a certain point where you want to get after him or you want to put him out there later on in the year. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. Find the show at LOBig12. Find us wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Make sure you guys subscribe. We'll be back on Sunday with a wrap-up of all the action. And also want to note to you all, the college football playoff stuff is happening this week and talking about a calendar. It's just expanding that part of the calendar in December, right? Not the 365-day calendar, but the calendar in December. What does that look like for the college football playoff? That's being discussed today. So we'll have more news on that next week. All right, my friends, as always, till next time, stay safe.